In December, Lake Macquarie Council set new garbage tip fees based on its operating costs. However, having recently discovered Newcastle Council is charging ratepayers more for its service, Lake Macquarie has raised its fees again in line with Newcastle charges.
It's necessary because otherwise the Newcastle residents would use our tip in preference to their own because our tip would be cheaper.
The Mayor says the increased fees will mainly affect commercial operators dealing in large quantities of rubbish. The minimum $2 fee for sedans and station wagons will remain unchanged. The new rates for dumping rubbish took effect today. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Bearing today's heat, Breakers keeper Mike Gibson was getting some practice in the nets. Mike is no stranger to representative soccer, having played for New South Wales and Australia in recent years. His selection in the state team has come as somewhat of a surprise, Mike making his return to the National League after 2 years out with a knee injury.
I thought it would take a little while to get established again, and there's a lot of good goalkeepers around to try and force out, but I've been fairly lucky.
And the comeback trail hasn't been easy.
It's taken a long time, but I wanted to make sure that I was over the injury properly, and at this stage it's going pretty well according to plans.
In his 8 games since joining the club 2 months ago, Mike has averaged less than a goal against him per game. Mike's determination to find form hasn't gone unnoticed by Breakers coach Bruce Stowell.
His professionalism and his knowledge of the game has added stability to the back four. It's allowed them to relax a wee bit more and become better defenders. He's got tremendous talent and he's got a long time in front of him.
Also named in the state team but absent from training today is Breakers captain Andrew Koska. Bruce Stowell says Gibson and Koska's selection, plus Dominic Longo's inclusion in the Australian Olympic team, shows the Breakers' increasing reputation on the national scene. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Medical students from Newcastle University will be able to complete part of their training at Gosford Hospital, according to Minister Phillips. Today's announcement about the hospital's new teaching status has been received with scepticism by the Deputy Opposition Leader Dr Andrew Refshorgi. He believes it's a desperate attempt to buy votes during the entrance by-election. Dr Refshorgi says the announcement does not include funding for teaching staff or facilities for heart surgery and kidney transplants. Minister Phillips disagrees. He claims the Central Coast Area Health Service has received strong support from the University of Newcastle, adding that the hospital will offer students experience in areas such as community medicine and obstetrics. Meanwhile, Newcastle unions and the Wallsend Hospital picket line will bring the Hunters Health Service problems to the notice of voters in the entrance. They plan to distribute leaflets outlining their grievances in the area prior to the by-election. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
While Amanda McGrath dealt with a cloudy head from a night of post-HSC results partying, she also made plans for an uncertain future after receiving a lower than expected mark.
I had to rethink what I was going to do, and I've made some decisions of changing courses for uni.
Amanda and fellow Merewether High pupil Andrew Krause have been joining the other 14,500 Hunter students who sat for the HSC, wondering what will become of the class of 91.
It's some universities, some jobs, and a lot of them I don't think will get either. They'll be trying to find their footing for quite some time before they'll be able to find a place.
With an estimated 50,000 school leavers likely to miss out on a place at university and facing a tight job market, the Employers Federation of New South Wales has proposed that job seekers work for free to gain experience. A Federation spokesman says that could break the catch-22, no experience, no job. But the Federation's proposal has been rejected as unrealistic and of benefit to no one.
The real issue is how we resolve the current jobs crisis and find jobs for people that have adequate pay, training and conditions, not how we return to conditions of 19th century exploitation.
Dr Green concedes the chances of employment for Hunter School leavers are bleak.
Newcastle employers are not taking on new labour.
And that's something the class of 91 knows all too well, as many apply for the dole.
There were some that applied on virtually the last day they had exams, and more it's, people are considering it because it's fairly hopeless, the job situation at the moment.
In the tranquil foothills of Wyoming, life, it seems, is very relaxing, but not for the small sisters and their horse Kelly. The least one would expect to see here is Annie Oakley turned gymnast. While elder sister Alison keeps watch, Gwenda and Kylie go through their paces. With the warm-up done, it's time for the real action.
It's sort of like gymnastics on horseback, so you need to learn to do rolls and stands and be strong in the arms. Anything that you do on a regular basis you don't think is daring. It's something, once you get used to something, you don't call it daring, we just call it fun and balance and that sort of thing, not really daring.
The sport originated in West Germany. Gwenda and Kylie became interested after seeing a horse vaulting display at a nearby indoor riding arena 3.5 years ago. 6 months of lessons and the girls went solo, doing a few exhibitions at local fetes, with Gwenda taking up teaching. For now, the teaching has stopped. The girls practice 3 to 4 hours a week, but that's not the only secret to good vaulting.
Don't be scared, and you've just got to learn to get your balance and enjoy yourself and have fun doing what you're doing. We've never had any really bad falls, but most of the time it's not too far to the ground.
Things don't always go to plan. Fearlessness seems a family trait. Little brother Andrew, having never broken in a horse before, attempting to do so with the family mule. Back to the vaulting, and the girls say despite the falls, it's great exercise and fitness training. Gwenda's also keen to resume teaching and convince others of just that.
The Phoenix Foundry is one of only 2 in Australia which makes bronze plaques attached to headstones. The plant has just won a contract with Rookwood Cemetery in Sydney to make the plates and has been pouring bronze daily to fulfil the order. Neighbours, however, claim the plant is releasing toxic isocyanate into the air, a substance used as a bonding agent when the bronze is poured. They say fumes from the plant are pervading the air around their homes, making them feel ill.
And the smell is horrible. I suffer, in my breathing. I nearly cry.
According to residents, plants are also dying.
You can see that tree there. It's already dead. And I lost about 10, 12 trees.
Uralla Shire Council today held a meeting to discuss the problem and will begin monitoring emissions from the foundry whenever pouring occurs.
The foundry has obliged by telling us when they'll be doing those pourings now, so we can go around there and monitor the situation.
The State Pollution Control Commission is also investigating the residents' complaints.
The skies over the city's beaches have been a colourful sight, with pilots from many nations on the wing. They're here with a variety of craft on their way to the national titles being held at Tumut next week.
We've got a lot of visiting pilots from Germany and Switzerland and France this year, The competition scene is pretty good in Australia. We've got 3 competitions running one after the other, and it's winter time over there, so it's a good opportunity for them to come over and practice.
Swiss test pilots are trialling paragliders, now more popular than hang gliders in Europe. Air vents inflate the parachute-like wing. But the show stealer is the locally produced Blitz. The appropriately named kite has taken Europe by storm, with remarkable success in the tough German market. Only about 50 of the gliders will be sold in Australia this year, but European and Japanese sales seem set to soar.
We're in there. I think we probably scored one of the better distributors over there, and he feels that he can sell 200 gliders for us in there next summer, which is pretty good. It means that we'll probably take the biggest share of the market over there if it works out for high performance gliders.
Developed by Airborne Wind Sports at Redhead, the Blitz sells for around $4,500. Its relatively small wing space and light weight generate lift, ideal for high-performance cross-country flying. Only 6 months off the drawing board, 3 Blitz gliders rank in the top 10 placings of the 140-strong Flatlands competition being flown at Forbes. Overseas competitors have ordered the gliders for the next leg of the contest. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
The half-yearly survey is done to measure community perceptions of how well the force is doing its job in the 26 police districts statewide. Of the 1,300 people randomly surveyed, a record 85% are satisfied with police performance. Newcastle District Commander Heinz Moeller believes that's due to higher police profile, with beat policing and neighbourhood watch major contributors. And the community agrees.
Well, I think they are. Isn't there something new now with the police patrolling the cities? I think that's very good.
Yeah, I think they're doing quite a good job, yeah. They're not too bad. Yeah, they keep us out of trouble, I suppose.
A greater cooperation between the community and police has emerged as the priority for both parties statewide. The survey also highlights other functions each district perceives as necessitating a job well done. Overall, police scored well. In Newcastle and Gosford, interaction with officers tops the list. In the performance stakes, Maitland Police take the prize for solving local problems. In Tamworth, Lismore and Port Macquarie, 90% satisfaction from people who'd had recent dealings with officers. And in the Orana district, police rate highest in their responsiveness to community concerns. Despite the positive results, the District Commander says there are still areas that need to be worked on. Over the past 12 months, in the Hunter and statewide, there's been a significant rise in the fear of victimisation amongst older people, women and ethnic groups.
I think that perceived fear is probably because of a number of one-off incidents which receive a high level of publicity.
The District Commander warns the survey is only a guideline and shouldn't be regarded as fact. He says one reported perception of there being a drink driving problem in the Newcastle-Port Macquarie areas is wrong.
The figures indicate that because of our increased presence on the road with stationary and mobile RBT testing, that the incident of people driving with a prescribed concentration of alcohol are actually lower than what they were last year.
Mr Moeller says such misperceptions highlights the need for greater communication with the community.
In an Australian first, 3 South American llamas have joined the big top, and supervising their schooling is a former trainer from the Moscow State Circus. Just 2 weeks into a 2-year stay, Alec Dendaev is also trying to learn some new tricks, in particular English, adding to the cultural mix 2 Scottish Highland cattle and a self-confessed American ham come ringmaster.
I joined Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus 10 years ago, just almost by chance. A friend was in, and I just fell in love with it from the point that I did the audition.
Dinny is also a recent arrival at Silvers. The New World Order is part of the circus showing at Spears Point till January 27.
The missing boy had been swimming at South Newcastle Beach with a friend while his father was on shore with two younger members of his family. When it became obvious the boy had been caught in a rip and was in trouble, his father swam out to help. Battling the heavy swell, he desperately tried to reach his son, but after diving under a breaking wave, he lost sight of him. Horrified onlookers described seeing the missing boy disappear under the water. After reaching shore, the father raised the alarm and every available rescue service was activated to search for his son. Police applauded the efforts of board riders who risked being swept onto rocks by the heavy swells as they searched in vain. Along with lifesavers from Newcastle, police launched the Westpac rescue helicopter and the NBN helicopter. The rescue chopper crew said the churning surf made it impossible to see below the surface. After about 40 minutes, the helicopter search was called off, but police have continued to search the rock shelves around the point. Cyclonic swells have made surf conditions dangerous at most beaches. Before joining the Newcastle search, the rescue helicopter had been on standby to fly to Blackhead near Foster, where 3 surfers were eventually rescued by a rubber ducky.
Alligator weed first appeared in Australian pastures near Williamtown, apparently introduced from South America in ballast dumped by coal ships. After decades of steady growth, the plant has suddenly made a dramatic leap further into the Hunter's waterways.
The ultimate scenario is for all freshwater and brackish areas in New South Wales and other states of Australia where it hasn't yet reached. It could come potential to be one of our major weed problems.
Senior Environment Lecturer Kevin McDonald and a team of students were commissioned by the Hunter Catchment Management Trust to study the spread of the plant. The findings are disturbing.
Yeah, we're in the upper reaches of Ironbark Creek, goes all the way down to the Hunter River, and of course on the way it borders the Hexham floodplain, the Hexham swamps, and if alligator weed gets going in that area, we're in for a really big problem.
If it gains a stranglehold in the wetlands, alligator weed could destroy an internationally recognised waterfowl breeding ground.
The water becomes more stagnant, more prone for the breeding of mosquitoes. Waterfowl can't use the water anymore because they can't land and take off with no open water left, and therefore it's a problem of great proportions.
Newcastle City Council is taking the initiative in preparing a plan of combat involving chemical spraying, biological controls and public awareness campaigns. Kevin McDonald believes early action may be the only hope Australia has to prevent the weed entering the Hunter River and eventually joining a long list of exotic plant species which have plagued Australian agriculture and wildlife.
The squatters were expecting the police and were determined to make things as difficult as possible for them. Department of Housing officials arrived armed with an eviction notice. They were soon followed by a convoy of 8 police vehicles.
This is what you're doing to people! Throwing them out in the street after they've been locked up in jail! You're supposed to be Department of Housing! What a joke!
A roadblock had been set up on the main access road. It stalled the operation for about 20 minutes. While it was being dismantled, police arrested Taimakari Co-op spokesman John Sword.
Tom, are you getting all this on camera?
As police moved onto the property, squatters ran for the hills or climbed trees to avoid capture. With the land due to be officially sold today, the idea was to prevent the new owner from claiming the vacant possession needed to make the transaction legal. In 1986, the then ALP state government began a multiple occupancy experiment on the 85-hectare property. The cooperative was disbanded in 1988 by the Greiner government, but people continued to come here, some seeking crisis accommodation, others attracted by the rent-free alternative lifestyle. Police ordered the media off the property as the roundup continued. Several people, including a woman clutching a child, were arrested and taken away in police wagons. The eviction continued throughout the day, with the squatters vowing to return as soon as the police left.
In a change from beating the political drum, the major contenders in the crucial entrance by-election donned headphones and an ear for music on Coast Rock's breakfast program. Stepping around the Australian Broadcasting Tribunal's ban on political advertisements, both candidates pushed their campaigns in between playing the hits. Grant McBride's choice of a Tina Turner song could have been a plea to voters. After a relentless campaign, the Liberals' Bob Graham thought Bruce Springsteen was most appropriate. And the forecasts read by Mr. Graham weren't limited to rain, hail or shine.
The Roll of Renown has recognised the contributions of country music greats such as Smokey Dawson and Slim Dusty. This morning it was Ned Nichols' turn.
Well, and what a wonderful moment. This is the ultimate, I guess, in a career in country music, to be honoured in this way.
Last night, the winner of the Golden Guitar New Talent of the Year was chosen. Colin Buchanan was discovered at last year's Tamworth Festival and has since released an album.
What does it mean to me? Well, it's a great boost to my career, and it's tremendous. I've had a lot of positive feedback from people, and it's great to get an award and to recognise that formally.
Five members of a Sydney family were swimming about 3 kilometres north of Hawk's Nest just after 1 o'clock when a rip swept 4 of them off a sandbar.
2 of them managed to get to shore, 2 were swept out to sea. Another male member of the family swam out to those 2 there, but unfortunately the 21-year-old girl drowned.
Family members desperately tried to revive the woman, and lifesavers dashed from the Hawk's Nest Surf Club to the unpatrolled beach, but it was too late. The family members were too distressed to talk on camera, but one of them said they were in Hawk's Nest on their first holiday in more than a year and were having just one more swim before returning to Sydney when the tragedy happened. Police say the woman, whose name is yet to be released, was apparently a strong swimmer, but she was competing against a surf whipped up by recent cyclonic conditions in Queensland.
The surf today, to look at it, is nothing unusually big. It's just a bit sloppy, but there was a few sweeps running where these people were.
And on the Central Coast, 2 men were injured after their speedboat flipped during a race on Brisbane waters. 1 man was taken to Gosford Hospital but was later discharged. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
If the cars of Australia keep guzzling petrol at the present rate, and there are no new oil discoveries, this country's fuel tank will be empty in just 12 years. But a switch to the fuels and engines represented in this year's Energy Challenge could keep us rolling a lot longer. The challenge, sponsored by the New South Wales Office of Energy and the NRMA, has been dubbed the Green Grand Prix. But speed has little to do with winning. That's decided by a complicated calculation of fuel efficiency. Many of the 37 entries are still a long way from being practical alternatives. The more bizarre stayed in the Sydney suburbs after a start at Darling Harbour. But 16 vehicles using a variety of fuels made the run to Newcastle, with air conditioning switched off to save energy. But in spite of the evidence, energy saving is still not an issue for most car owners. Even though the figures are there that Australia is running out of fuel, can you see the Australian motoring public abandoning their large cars for petrol misers like this?
No, I can't see them doing it. I mean, they're just too used to what they're doing. But I mean, the day might come when we have to, and there's no choice. And that's what this event's all about.
This Falcon represents a world first. It's using an Australian-developed LPG fuel injection system, which overcomes some of the power disadvantages of using LPG. But even though Australia has plenty of that fuel, it seems likely the invention will be taken up by an American manufacturer.
Yes, we found a lot of interest from Canada and USA.
After returning to Sydney today, competitors will do a similar run to Wollongong tomorrow. Jim Sullivan, NBN News. Protesters and police were on standby 2 hours before the woodchip bulk carrier hove into sight. But it was always obvious that there was unlikely to be any real confrontation. Police almost outnumbered the protesters, and only a sole canoe carried the message onto the water. Under the watchful eye of the police, the protesters were invited onto the wharf. The manager of the facility, Alan Dagger, says his company respects the right to protest, as long as the protesters respect the company's rights. The protest organiser said this morning's action was never intended to halt the loading operation.
It wasn't intended to stop the operation. It is intended to raise public awareness about the woodchipping issue.
Some $30 million worth of woodchip is exported annually through the Port of Newcastle. The operating company, Boral, says this woodchip comes mainly from waste generated by 45 North Coast sawmills and from forest thinnings. The Wilderness Society challenges these figures and remains totally opposed to any logging operations in native forests.
The Wilderness Society has an objective of seeing all native forest logging stopped. We believe it's gone too far already. There's no space for any more logging of native forests, and that means no more export wood chipping, which comes from our native forests.
One in 7 girls in Australia play netball, and today 30 future champions were given some expert tuition in Newcastle.
So a little bit into the knees, up on the toes and then release as you go. Good girl.
When you think of netball, Anne Sargent is the first name that probably comes to mind. And with another former international, Karen Smith, is sharing her skills in a series of coaching clinics around the state. Australia has a proud tradition in netball with 6 World Championship titles. But even with that enviable record, the sport still lacked a strong public image. But according to Anne, that's all changing.
There are public relations companies in place, marketing in place, to really let people know what we're doing.
And a certain match in July last year gave the game a terrific boost. A hard-fought victory over the Kiwis in the World Championships had the nation talking and the sport shooting for greater goals.
We've got the record in terms of results, we've got the numbers, and now the PR campaign's falling into place.
The sky's the limit.
Yes, watch out, fellas.
Okay.
The 82-year-old rectory is coming down, but as the saying goes, it won't happen in a day. That's because demolition is by hand and plenty of TLC. It'll take around 3 weeks to complete the job, with all contents recycled and sold. The building's age making its parts highly sought after.
The fireplaces are hard to find. The windows are hard to find. The French doors are also, you don't get French doors like you do in these places.
Plans for a new $180,000 rectory aren't completed. What's decided upon must be approved by the Heritage Council and blend in with the surrounding environment, in particular Newcastle's oldest church. Regardless of what's picked, Father Robert Howe's priority is simple.
I'd like something very comfortable to live in, that's the most important.
Do you think that the atmosphere of what was will ever be recaptured?
Well, you couldn't get 11 feet odd ceilings and things like that anymore, not easily.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News. The fire started shortly before 11 this morning. Minutes later, 3 fire brigades were on the scene.
When we got here, the bedroom, the front part of the house was fully involved in fire.
Within 10 minutes, the fire was contained, the front bedroom gutted with smoke and damage to the rest of the house. No one was injured. The family had left the house for the day. Newcastle Scientific Squad is investigating the cause. And the cause of a fire in an arts factory in Sydney South is also being investigated. The blaze broke out at around midday, quickly spreading through the building, which contained paper and plastic used to make store displays. Firefighters battled for an hour to bring it under control and prevent it reaching nearby homes.
The driver of the northbound semi-trailer, a 33-year-old man from Lorne, was killed when his vehicle collided head-on with a horse float on a shallow bend of the highway near Cundletown at about 4 o'clock this morning. The smash demolished both vehicles, scattering wreckage across the road. A 35-year-old woman from Tanambit, also riding in the semi-trailer, suffered serious injuries and was taken to Manning Base Hospital. A 19-year-old woman from Tweed Heads, travelling as a passenger in the horse float, was also seriously hurt and taken to the same hospital. The southbound truck was carrying valuable Arabian thoroughbreds to a horse show in Sydney. One of the animals died in the crash. 2 others were destroyed by a vet. Traffic was diverted around the scene for 7 hours as the wreckage was cleared away. The 39-year-old float driver from Victoria was charged late this afternoon with culpable driving. The death brings the state's road toll to 38, compared with 44 to the same date last year. Tom Hilston, NBN News.